Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks, and in this bulletin we'll get you a roundup of stories developing around the world. First up, the day's top headlines. The US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi hold talks in Switzerland as the two countries find themselves at odds on a variety of issues, including Taiwan and trade. As tensions hit a new high between Taipei and Beijing, Taiwan's defense minister says that the island fears a Chinese invasion by 2025, calling the tensions the worst in 4 decades. Ending a 4-day conference of his ruling Conservative Party, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson promises that the country will emerge from Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic as a stronger, more dynamic nation, even if the road is slightly rocky. For the first time in several days, Facebook's co-founder Mark Zuckerberg breaks his silence, saying a whistleblower's claims don't make any sense. Russia reports a record high number of daily coronavirus deaths as the country struggles with high infection rates. Regions beyond Moscow are reintroducing some pandemic restrictions. And Germany's Benjamin List and David Macmillan from the US win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for their development of a precise new tool for molecular construction. Amid simmering tensions between China and Taiwan, US President Joe Biden says he's secured an assurance from President Xi Jinping that China will abide by existing agreements over Taiwan. In the past week, the standoff between China and the island has escalated. Taiwan reported 148 incursions by Chinese warplanes into its airspace over the last several days. It prompted Washington to urge Beijing to stop its military aggression against Taiwan. Taiwan says that military tensions with China are at their worst in over 40 years.
As tensions mount between China and Taiwan, US President Joe Biden has spoken on the phone to Chinese President Xi Jinping. Biden told reporters on Tuesday that both leaders had agreed to keep to the Taiwan Agreement, an apparent reference to Washington's policy of recognizing Beijing rather than Taipei, on the expectation that the future of Taiwan will be determined by peaceful means.
I've spoken with Xi about Taiwan. We agree we'll abide by the Taiwan Agreement. That's where we are. And we made it clear that I don't think he should be doing anything other than abiding by the agreement.
China claims Taiwan as its own territory and has not ruled out the possible use of force to achieve unification. The island, which broke away from the mainland in 1949, rejects Beijing's claims and has its own democratically elected government. Over a 4-day period beginning last Friday, Taiwan reported close to 150 Chinese Air Force aircraft entered its air defense zone. The show of force from Beijing has been condemned by Washington and Taipei. Taiwan's defense minister said on Wednesday China will be capable of mounting a full-scale invasion by 2025, adding that relations were at their worst level in more than 40 years.
要犯台的话，他目前有这能力，都有的，但要看怎么一个结局。所以我们不做任何挑衅但如果把他激怒了，就跟我们人一样，你把我激怒了，我手上能力我也会发挥出来。 所以2025是我们研判要全面我们这样研判的。
With more, WION's Hong Kong correspondent Richard Kimber, who sent us this report earlier.
The US says that its support of Taiwan is rock solid and that it will not be shaken by any Chinese dismissal of its support. It says under that Taiwan agreement that it has a commitment to Taiwan that it will uphold irrespective of any actions on China's part showing military assertiveness in the region. China, on the other hand, dismissing all of the criticism it's facing, principally from the US, over these actions. It of course says that Taiwan is part of its territory, so it has the right to fly planes there whenever it likes. And talking to political analysts here, they say that they don't think this will escalate into full-blown military conflict because they say it's in nobody's interests for that to happen, not least the US that's just been entangled in a complex withdrawal from Afghanistan, and also they say it's not in President Xi Jinping's interests for that to happen either because of his longer-term strategy to try to maintain power over the Greater China region. He didn't want that, they say, to be undermined by any short-term power grab to get Taiwan back as quickly as possible.
For the first time in 4 years, the US has publicly disclosed the number of nuclear warheads that are in its stockpile. The release of the information comes after former American President Donald Trump blacked the data out. The US military's present tally, including active and inactive nuclear warheads, as of January this year, stood at 5,550. However, if you go all the way back to 1967, the US then held a whopping total of 31,255 warheads. The latest figure is the lowest level since the US nuclear stockpile peaked at the height of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. The numbers have been published by the administration after they were stalled under President Donald Trump. Washington is looking to restart arms control talks with Moscow. The State Department said in a statement, increasing the transparency of states' nuclear stockpiles is important to non-proliferation and disarmament efforts. Former President Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal, the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia, as well as the New START Treaty before its scheduled expiration on February the 5th. At the time, Trump said he wanted a new deal which would include China. It was the New START Treaty that limited the number of nuclear warheads held by Washington and Moscow. Analysts say Donald Trump's gambit of letting the treaty expire could have led to a reversal of warhead reductions on both sides. According to a January 2021 tally by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, which includes retired warheads not counted in the State Department's numbers, the United States had 5,550 warheads compared to 6,255 in Russia, 350 in China, 225 in Britain, and 290 in France. According to the Institute, India, Pakistan, Israel and North Korea have together around 360 nuclear warheads. Biden, who took office on January the 20th, immediately proposed a 5-year extension to the New START Treaty, which Russian President Vladimir Putin quickly agreed to. The deal caps the number of nuclear warheads that can be deployed by Moscow and Washington at 1,550. Last week, Russia and US diplomats held talks behind closed doors in Geneva to begin discussions on a successor to the New START Treaty, and also talks about controls on conventional weapons. A US official called the dialogue productive. Both sides said the mere fact they were holding the talks was positive. Now, first came the global outage of the company's social media apps, then damaging testimony from a former employee who claims Facebook chooses profit over safety. Troubles are only escalating for Facebook chief Mark Zuckerberg. The CEO has broken his silence now on the whistleblower's allegations, putting forth a strong defence in a note distributed to Facebook staff. Zuckerberg said that the claims made by the former employee, Frances Haugen, do not make any sense. He said the argument that Facebook deliberately pushes content that makes people angry, all for profit, is illogical. Zuckerberg also countered that Haugen's claim on a 2018 newsfeed change that she says encourages the sharing of more divisive content. He said the change was made to encourage the sharing of more content between friends and family, despite Facebook knowing that it would lead to decreased engagement. Referring to claims that Instagram has negative effects on teenagers, Zuckerberg said the company would continue its research and prioritize building apps that are safe and positive for children. On Tuesday, a Senate committee convened a public hearing with Facebook's whistleblower, Frances Haugen. The focus of the hearing was safety of children and broader concerns, including the company's controversial algorithms.
I'm here today because I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy.
Explosive testimony from a former Facebook employee turned whistleblower. Frances Haugen, a former product manager on Facebook's civic misinformation team, told a congressional committee on Tuesday that Facebook knowingly amplifies divisive and harmful content, choosing profit over safety, and that Facebook has sought to keep its operations confidential amid mounting scrutiny, especially in regards to its effects on children.
Congressional action is needed. Today, no regulator has a menu of solutions for how to fix Facebook because Facebook didn't want them to know enough about what's causing the problems.
Lawmakers in both parties pounced.
Its only real principle is profit.
Mark Zuckerberg's going sailing and saying no apologies.
Accusing CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg of pushing for higher profits, while being cavalier about user safety. And they demanded that regulators investigate whistleblower accusations that the social media company harms children and stokes divisions.
Our children are the ones who are victims. Teens today, looking at themselves in the mirror, feel doubt and insecurity. Mark Zuckerberg ought to be looking at himself in the mirror.
In the end, the buck stops with Mark. There is no one currently holding Mark accountable but himself.
Haugen said Facebook had also done too little to prevent its site from being used by people planning violence, saying its focus on metrics trumped ethical concerns. Facebook was used by people planning mass killings in Myanmar and the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol by supporters of then-President Donald Trump, who was determined to toss out the 2020 election results.
Facebook can change, but is clearly not going to do so on its own. My fear is that without action, divisive and extremist behaviors we see today are only the beginning. What we saw in Myanmar and are now seeing in Ethiopia are only the opening chapters of a story so terrifying, no one wants to read the end of it.
Haugen says Facebook has the tools to de-emphasize divisive content, but chooses not to use it to keep engagement high.
Facebook knows that content that elicits an extreme reaction from you is more likely to get a click, a comment, or reshare.
A Facebook spokeswoman disputed Haugen's knowledge of the company's inner workings, adding, quote, "We don't agree with her characterization of the many issues she testified about." The Senate hearing reflects the rising anger in Congress with Facebook amid numerous demands for legislative reforms, with senators warning that Facebook faces a reckoning akin to other industries like big tobacco.
Russia is reporting record deaths due to a surge in COVID-19 cases fueled by the Delta variant. With Moscow as the epicenter of the outbreak, Russia has reported over 929 deaths in the last 24 hours, taking the country's death toll to over 212,000. With more than 7.5 million cases of infection, Russia is now the fifth worst affected country in the world. It's recorded over 25,000 new cases in the last 24 hours, and Russia has reported a rise in deaths for the fifth time in the past week. The nation first reported 887 deaths on the 1st of October, then 895 deaths on October the 5th. Now nearly 1,000 deaths in just 24 hours.
There is a sufficient supply of masks or other means of personal protection. We maintain high levels of testing. In all of the cases, without exclusion, there are conditions in the Russian regions provided for people to get vaccinated. There is also a reserve of medication made. although the level of vaccination is insufficient to stop the spread of infection.
Russia remains in need of a rapid vaccination drive, so what's the reason behind the vaccine hesitancy in the country? Well, first, there's fear of new medical products. There's also a lack of trust in the authorities. Russia's Sputnik V vaccine is yet to be approved by the World Health Organization, though it is being widely used internationally. Russia has offered free jabs to people since late last year. However, only a third of its population has received at least one dose of vaccine. Despite incentives, just over a quarter of the population remains fully vaccinated, which means Russia has administered shots to over 42 million people. According to the country's deputy prime minister, they need to inoculate almost 33 million more people in order to achieve herd immunity. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is ruling out nationwide restrictions. Russia has had only one national lockdown, which occurred during the early stages of the pandemic. However, the mayor of Moscow has announced mass testing given the current surge. The authorities plan to introduce it in Russia's capital within the next 2 weeks. The government has also recommended the introduction of QR codes proving vaccination for public entry to mass events. The American director Stanley Kubrick directed his epic science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey back in the year 1968. The movie was released just 11 years after Russia sent humanity's first ever artificial satellite into space. It was called Sputnik. More than 5 decades later comes another landmark, the first movie ever to be actually filmed in space. A crew of Russian filmmakers have reached the International Space Station, where they plan to shoot a film in orbit, eclipsing the oldest film industry in the world, Hollywood.
Russian actress Yulia Peresild.
A Russian actor and director arrived at the International Space Station on Tuesday. The cameras were rolling as Yulia Peresild floated through the hatch of the ISS on a mission to make the first film in space. Peresild and director Klim Shapenko will spend 12 days on board, filming scenes for their film, The Challenge.
Everything was new to us today. Every 30 seconds brought us something entirely new. And we've just met the rest of the crew, the cosmonauts and astronauts who have been living on board the station for some time now. But I'm still in a dream. I still feel that it's all just a dream, and I'm asleep.
Earlier, footage from the space station showed their Soyuz MS-19 spacecraft docking at the station, 220 miles above Earth. The film they're producing has Peresild playing a doctor who travels to the space station to save a cosmonaut's life.
Expedition 65!
Cosmonaut crew members are also set to appear in the film. The project puts Russia on course to beat the US in the latest chapter in the space race, movie making. Last year, NASA announced plans for Hollywood star Tom Cruise to blast off for a yet-to-be-named film.
But we did hear yesterday that the man who played Captain Kirk, William Shatner, an actor, is going to be heading into space, but he won't be participating in any filming. In Singapore, privacy concerns are being raised over the use of patrolling robots that blast warnings at people engaging in undesirable social behaviour. The robot detects smoking in prohibited areas, improper parking and other breaches and blares out loud warnings. Patrol robots are part of an arsenal of surveillance devices used by the government of Singapore. Opposing intrusive technology, activists are citing privacy concerns to question the government's move.
This is how Xavier will deal with those indulging in undesirable social behavior on the streets of Singapore. Xavier, a robot equipped with 7 cameras, will blast warnings at people and detect behavior deemed inappropriate. This includes smoking in prohibited areas, parking bicycles improperly, and breaching coronavirus rules. During a recent patrol, one of the Xavier robots wove its way through a housing estate. It stopped in front of a group of elderly residents watching a chess match.
Please keep to 5 persons per group.
This is what the robot blared out. From streets to shopping complexes to parking lots, patrol robots will be monitoring citizens' behavior. This is added to an arsenal of Singapore's surveillance technology, and it is now fueling privacy concerns.
It's another way, another means through which people feel surveilled, right? Where they feel like they might not be safe to articulate certain views or to engage in certain behaviors. I think that it all contributes to just sort of the sense people have that they need to watch what they say and what they do in Singapore to a far greater extent than they would in other countries.
For long, officials have pushed a vision of hyper-efficient, tech-driven smart nation. But activists say privacy is being sacrificed and people have little control over what happens to their data. Activists also say devices were the latest way Singaporeans were being watched.
It's dystopian because of the extent to which we are visibly surveilled. But I think that what's more dystopian for me is that it is normalized and that people are not responding much to this at all.
The government, however, defends its use of robots. It says robots were needed to address a labor crunch as the population ages.
I think there's still a need for the robot. Even though Singapore is safe, but there might be things happening that we didn't expect. So if the robot is around and something happens, the people in the control room will have a record of it and they can see what happened.
I think it's good in some security perspective, so to ensure the safety in the society. So if there's anything happen, I think still got a footage to track back. Yeah.
The country is frequently criticized for curbing civil liberties, and people are accustomed to tight controls. But there is still growing unease at intrusive technology. The island of about 5.5 million people has 90,000 police cameras. The number is set to double by 2030. From vast number of CCTV cameras to trails of lampposts with facial recognition technology, Singapore is seeing an explosion of tools to track its inhabitants. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Finally, a drone light show went horribly wrong in China. A malfunction led to all the drones falling out of the sky. Initially, the error appeared to look like shooting stars, but things then got pretty dangerous. We'll leave you with this report. Thanks for watching. Stay with WION. World is One.
Many other